video, we're going to be getting started with three-dimensional AutoCAD. So far, even the isometric and oblique drawings you've been making have just been two-dimensional. They've been only in the XY plane, and you're just sort of fooling your viewer into thinking it's three-dimensional based on the angles of the lines you're using. Now we're actually going to be making 3D surfaces and solids. To get started, what I would recommend doing is changing your workspace. I can come in another little gear. I'm going to change out of Classic into, you can see I've already changed into 3D modeling, which gives me this ribbon up here with a whole bunch of three-dimensional drafting commands. Or I can use 3D Basics, which just sort of minimizes what it thinks I will need and just gives me a fraction of these commands. So I'm going to stay in 3D modeling. Okay, to get started, I'm going to use a box command, which is essentially a three-dimensional rectangle command. So I will type box. First corner, I'll use 0, 0. Other corner, I'll do 8, 8. Oops. 8, comma 8. Okay, and then the height, I'm going to give it a height of 5. So everything looks the same so far. It looks just like a normal box. That's because I'm in the 2D wireframe visual style. If I change to either realistic, which will sort of give me a false light source, and so when I rotate around, you can see the box is sort of shiny based on where it thinks a light source might be. I prefer, there's shaded. I prefer shaded with edges, which looks just about the same, but it gives me the wireframe for the border. Okay, so now we can see that we've got an actual solid here rather than just a set of lines like we've been used to in two-dimensional. So what I'm going to do to remove if I were to bore a hole through the center of this block, I'm actually going to make the shape and then subtract that shape from the block. So I will make a cylinder that goes up a little taller than the box, and then remove that. And I've got a couple different ways I can do that. So I'll go back to 2D wireframe, and I'm going to rotate around. By the way, how I'm rotating is normally if you hold down the center wheel of the mouse, you can pan around. But instead of panning, I'm going to hold down the Shift key as well. So when I click the center wheel of the mouse and move around, it pivots around where I had the cursor when I clicked down the center wheel to rotate. So I'll rotate around myself to the top so I can see what's going on again. You can also use this little cube thing over here, which you can grab different parts of the cube and rotate around. I think that's a little slower. But when you want to align yourself to a face, if you click on the top face or you can click on these arrows, you can be looking perpendicular to a certain plane, which at times can have advantages over just rotating around close to where you want to be looking at it. So I'll go back into my top view. I'm going to use the cylinder command, which is my three-dimensional option on how to create this cylinder. It's just one command. So my center point I will put at right in the middle of that block, 4, 4. If I hit comma one more time, I can actually see a z value as well. I'll keep that at 0. Just make sure. Okay, so it thinks it's being smart. So AutoCAD wants to make the cylinder starting at the top of my box, which isn't really what I wanted it to do, but that's fine. I just have to be careful about where it decides it wants to make the box. So the base radius I'm going to call 3, and the height, if I bring the cursor down below where I'm drawing, I can either enter a value that way, or if I'm above, I can enter a value, a negative value. So I'll enter a value of, I'll say -7. And actually, I'd like this cylinder, we can see it's sort of protruding below. I'm actually going to use the move command. I'm going to center, well, doesn't matter. I'll grab here, and if I turn on my ortho mode, it thinks I just want to move ortho only allows me to move parallel to one axis. You can see I can either come out in the x direction, y direction, or now I'm moving only in the z direction. So I'm going to move myself up 1 in the z direction. So now we can see if I go back to my shaded with edges, we can see it's a cylinder that is taller than the box and is sticking up 1 off the top and bottom of the block. So I could get rid of this cylinder and have a hole through the center of the box. But first I'm going to delete it and show another way to go about doing that with a few other commands. So I'll go back to the top. Let's see, shaded with edges. I'm going to go back to 2D wireframe to see what's going on. And if I want to set up something that defaults drawing a certain height above where I was already drawing, I can use the elevation command. So my new default elevation I'm going to call 2, since I think AutoCAD, something's going on where AutoCAD thinks it's smart, and since I put in a height of 5 for this block, it wants to be drawing things up 5 above. So if I add an elevation of 2, I believe that will put my circle 2 above the top of this block. So if I were to type circle, my center point, again, I'm going to call 4, 4. Radius, I'm going to use as 3. Okay, so if I rotate myself around, well, that's interesting. Sometimes the elevation and height things can get a little weird with three-dimensional AutoCAD, but I can always move things. So I'll move it 1 above. You can see that when I changed my elevation up to 2, it actually moved the grid up 2 as well. We can see that the origin is still down there where the colorful Z, Y, and X axes are right now. But the green and red lines that extend off the screen are where my grid currently is, which is 2 above. So I'm going to change my elevation back down to 0. You can see it's also asking me for a default thickness, which would give, rather than making my objects into solids when I draw them, it would give a line, basically a height in the z direction that's sort of a thickness, which would turn it into a sort of a plane or a surface rather than a solid. Okay, so to see what's going on, I'm going to switch back into shaded with edges. We can see that my circle is still a two-dimensional object. So what I'm going to do is use the extrude command. So I'm going to type ext, or I can just type out extrude. I'll select the object I'd like to extrude, and I will put my cursor on the side I'd like to extrude on. So I'm going to go this direction. I want a distance of 7, so I have the same exact cylinder I did before. And there we go. That's another way to end up with the same result. So I'm going to remove this cylinder from the box. So I'm going to go ahead and use the subtract command. So with the subtract command, I actually want to select, we can see it select solid surfaces and regions to subtract from. So I'm going to subtract the object that I want to cut things out of first. So I'll select my block. So now I hit enter, and now it says select solid surfaces and regions to subtract. So I will select my cylinder, hit enter, and now we can see that I've got a hole through the center of this block. Another command that you're going to use pretty frequently on your three-dimensional AutoCAD assignments is the slice command, which can get a little tricky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a line at which later time I can set up a slicing plane through. So I'm going to put a plane that sort of cuts at an angle through this block. I'd like it to go to the middle of this side of the block. So to give myself some points to snap to later on, or I could snap to the midpoint later, but I will put a line just so we can see what's going on. I'll go from one midpoint to the other. We can see that lines that are going up in the z-axis also have midpoints that we can snap to as well with our osnap command. Okay.